It was a cool autumn day in 1918. A vast empire, one that had dominated Central Europe for centuries, seemed to simply vanish. Yet the ghost of this fallen giant still strolls through our modern world, leaving behind far more than crumbling palaces and dusty history books. Its fingerprints are on your morning coffee and the way your government works, even in the very air you breathe in certain ancient cities. This isn't just about emperors and archdukes. It is about how their decisions, their loves, their mistakes, and their wild dreams shape the lives of millions, then and continue to ripple across continents today. Prepare to discover the surprising ways the Habsburg Empire still whispers its tales into our present. Number 10. A blueprint for unions, royal marriages, and dynastic games. Picture a young girl, perhaps no older than your older sister, dressed in heavy velvet and lace. She stands awkwardly, her hand held by a boy she has never met, both of them future rulers of distant lands. This scene repeated itself countless times across the centuries. Not for love, but for power, the Habsburg family perfected the art of strategic marriage. A Game of Thrones played with wedding rings instead of swords. Other empires relied on conquest. The Habsburgs often preferred a lavish ceremony and a carefully negotiated dowry. "Let others wage war, you happy Austria marry," went the famous saying. It was their secret weapon building. An empire not always through bloody battles, but through carefully arranged partnerships that brought vast territories under their crown. One of the most remarkable examples arrived in the 15th century. Maximilian I, a young ambitious archduke, married Mary of Burgundy. This wasn't just a union of two people. It was a merger of two powerful houses. Mary brought with her the wealthy and strategically important Low Countries, what is today Belgium and the Netherlands. Think of it like two massive corporations joining forces, instantly expanding their reach and resources. This single marriage instantly transformed the Habsburgs from powerful regional players into a force on the European stage. It was a master class in soft power, demonstrating how a carefully chosen spouse could achieve what an army might struggle for years to gain. The territories acquired through this union brought immense wealth and new artistic influences, enriching the Habsburg court in ways that shaped its future cultural identity. Their children continued this grand strategy. Philip, the handsome Maximilian, and Mary's son, married Joanna, the mad daughter of the powerful Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. This brought Spain, its vast American colonies, and its Italian territories into the Habsburg orbit. Suddenly, a family that originated in a small Swiss castle held sway over a global empire where the sun literally never set. Imagine the challenges of governing such diverse lands, from the bustling markets of Antwerp to the silver mines of Mexico. Yet the sheer scale of this dynastic connection was unprecedented. Charles V, their son, inherited an empire so immense it seemed almost mythical, stretching from Vienna to Peru. He spent his life traveling across his lands, trying to manage a territory so vast and varied that it defied easy control, all thanks to a series of strategic nuptials. The impact of this approach was profound. It meant the Habsburgs were constantly navigating complex webs of family loyalty and gulling ambition. Cousin married cousin, aunt married nephew. While it consolidated power, it also led to genetic peculiarities. The famous Habsburg jaw, a distinctive underbite, became a recognizable trait, a visible sign of centuries of carefully managed inbreeding designed to keep power within the family. It was a physical manifestation of their dynastic strategy, a visible reminder that bloodlines were their most valuable currency. Portraits of Habsburg rulers across generations show this distinctive feature, a constant presence, a whisper of their unique path to power. This reliance on marriage meant that diplomacy became paramount. Every wedding negotiation was a high-stakes chess match involving emissaries, legal experts, and careful consideration of dowries and inheritance rights. Treaties were not just about borders and armies, They were about securing the next generation of alliances. The very structure of European international relations for centuries was influenced by these dynastic connections. Wars were often fought, not just for land, but for claims to thrones based on intricate family trees. The War of the Spanish Succession, a brutal conflict that reshaped Europe, was fundamentally about who would inherit the Spanish crown after the last Habsburg king of Spain died childless. It showed that even when the dynastic strategy failed to produce an heir, its absence could trigger continent-wide conflict. Even when the empire dissolved, the idea of these interconnected royal families, a network woven by marriage, persisted. European monarchies remained intertwined through the legacies of Habsburg unions, the very concept of European royalty. A distinct social and political class owed much to the intricate family web spun by the Habsburgs. Their strategy was not just about acquiring land. It was about creating a system of governance and influence that transcended national borders. It set a precedent for how European powers would interact for centuries. A silent testament to the power of a wedding vow. Even today, you might find a distant relative of a Habsburg duke in an unexpected place, a quiet echo of a time when marriages forged empires. Number 9. The ghost of identity. National consciousness after empire. The year 1918 brought a seismic shift to Central Europe. The old order symbolized by the sprawling Habsburg Empire shattered into a dozen pieces. Out of its ruins, new nations began to rise, each eager to define itself, to carve out its own distinct identity. Yet this process was never simple, never a clean break. The long shadow of the empire continued to stretch across the newly formed borders, shaping how people thought about themselves, their neighbors, and their place in the world. It was like a family suddenly breaking up with each member trying to forge a new life, but still carrying the shared memories, traditions, and sometimes resentments of their common past. For centuries, people living within the Habsburg lands identified themselves in layers. They were Bohemian and subject to the emperor. They were Slovene and part of the Austrian half of the dual monarchy. They were Croat and part of the Kingdom of Hungary. Their primary loyalty often lay with the emperor, the unifying figurehead above all the different ethnic and linguistic groups. But as the 19th century progressed, the idea of nation began to take root, nurtured by intellectuals, poets, and political activists. They started dreaming of distinct Polish, Czech, Hungarian, South Slav, and Romanian states, each with its own language, culture, and history at its core. These dreams, simmering for decades, finally exploded into reality after the Great War. The new borders drawn on maps did not always align perfectly with where different ethnic groups lived. Many Czechs found themselves in German-speaking areas of Czechoslovakia. Many Hungarians lived outside Hungary's new borders. This created immediate tensions and questions of belonging. How do you build a unified nation when significant portions of your population feel more affinity with a neighboring state or with the old imperial system? The legacy of the Habsburgs was a mosaic of peoples. And when that mosaic was forcefully broken apart, the individual tiles struggled to fit neatly into new, smaller frames. This struggle became a defining feature of the 20th century in Central Europe. Even the languages themselves bore the empire's imprint. German, the language of administration and high culture for centuries, remained a lingua franca in many areas. Even if it was no longer the official language, the shared history of schooling, bureaucracy, and military service meant that many people across different ethnic groups had some familiarity with German, a quiet echo of the imperial past. Street names, administrative terms, even certain turns of phrase in local languages carried German influences, a testament to the long period of shared rule. It showed that even when political systems change, linguistic habits and cultural borrowings linger. Consider the architecture. In cities like Prague, Budapest, and Zagreb, the grand boulevards, the imposing public buildings, the elegant apartment blocks were all built during the Habsburg era. They were designed to reflect imperial power and prestige, but they became the physical backdrop for the new nation-states. A Czech citizen walked past the same imperial parliament building that once housed representatives from all corners of the empire. A Hungarian citizen entered the same grand opera house that had showcased composers from Vienna. These physical structures served as constant reminders of a shared history. Even as people strove to build distinct futures, they anchored the new identities in a visible past. The very concept of Central Europe as a distinct region, neither fully Western nor fully Eastern, was largely a creation of the Habsburg experience. It was a region characterized by its multi-ethnic complexity, its layered histories, and its unique blend of cultural influences. Even after the empire's demise, intellectuals and artists debated what Mitteleuropa meant, trying to define a shared cultural space that transcended political boundaries. Was it a shared literary tradition, a particular way of thinking, a common historical memory? These questions showed that the imperial experience had forged a unique regional identity that couldn't simply be erased by new borders. The challenges of national identity continue to play out in these regions. Debates over minority rights, historical narratives, and international relations often trace their roots back to the complex ethnic map left by the Habsburgs. The experience of being part of a larger multi-ethnic entity meant that the concept of a pure nation was always fraught with contradictions. This legacy compelled the new nations to grapple with the realities of diversity within their own borders, a direct inheritance from the empire that had once encompassed them all. The ghost of multi-ethnicity, once managed by a unifying emperor, now became an internal challenge for each new state, shaping their domestic policies and their international interactions. Number 8. The art of survival. Habsburg military and diplomacy. For centuries, the Habsburg Empire found itself in a constant dance of war and peace, a relentless struggle for survival and influence. It wasn't always the strongest military power, nor always the most innovative diplomatically, but it possessed an uncanny ability to endure. This resilience, born out of necessity, shaped its military and diplomatic traditions, leaving behind a complex legacy that still echoes in the way nations conduct themselves. Imagine trying to hold together a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and territories surrounded by ambitious neighbors like France, Prussia, and the Ottoman Empire. The Habsburgs had no choice but to master the art of strategic maneuvering. Their military was a truly multi-ethnic force. Soldiers from Hungary, Bohemia, Italy, Croatia, and a dozen other regions served under the imperial flag, speaking different languages, singing different songs, yet fighting for the same emperor. This diversity was both a strength and a challenge. Commanders had to learn to manage different fighting styles and cultural sensitivities, forging a cohesive unit out of disparate parts. This experience of commanding diverse forces informed military practices for generations. Even after the empire dissolved, the national armies that emerged from its ashes inherited elements of this multi-ethnic tradition, adapting it to their new national context. The discipline, the organizational structure, and even some of the uniform designs carried hints of their imperial past. Habsburg diplomacy was a masterpiece of intricate alliances and counter-alliances with no clear geographical borders and ambitions. Often clashing with other great powers, they had to be agile. The diplomatic revolution of the 18th century stands as a prime example. For centuries, Austria and France had been bitter enemies, yet faced with the rising power of Prussia, Maria Theresia, the indomitable empress, orchestrated a stunning reversal of alliances. She famously dispatched her trusted minister, Wenzel Anton von Kaunitz-Riedberg, to Paris to negotiate a new pact. This wasn't just a political shift. It was a societal earthquake. It showed that even the deepest historical enmities could be overcome when strategic necessity demanded it. This willingness to break tradition and forge unexpected partnerships became a hallmark of effective diplomacy in a constantly shifting European landscape. It set a precedent for pragmatic interest-driven foreign policy rather than one solely based on historical animosity. The sheer duration of the Habsburg Empire meant it was involved in nearly every major European conflict for 500 years. From the Ottoman Wars in the East, where they stood as a bulwark defending Christian Europe, to the Napoleonic Wars that shook the continent, the Habsburgs were always at the center of the storm. This long history of engagement fostered a deep understanding of European power dynamics. Their diplomats, trained in the ornate halls of Vienna, became renowned for their shrewdness and patience. They understood the delicate balance of power better than most, recognizing that small shifts could have massive consequences. This deep institutional knowledge of European politics and the intricate dance of alliances became a valuable asset, influencing the shape of European diplomacy long after the empire was gone. The Congress of Vienna in 1815, following the defeat of Napoleon, stands as a testament to Habsburg diplomatic influence. Prince Clemens von Metternich, Austria's foreign minister, dominated the proceedings. He wasn't just representing Austria. He was shaping the future of Europe. His vision of a conservative order based on a balance of power and the suppression of revolutionary movements guided European politics for decades. The Concert of Europe, a system where great powers consulted on major issues to prevent widespread conflict, was largely a brainchild of this era, heavily influenced by Habsburg ideas of stability and maintaining the status quo. Even today, discussions about international cooperation and preventing conflicts often harken back to the principles established in Vienna under Metternich's watchful eye. Their military legacy also included an emphasis on fortifications and border defense. The empire's long eastern frontier with the Ottoman Empire led to the development of sophisticated defensive lines, military settlements, and a constant state of readiness. This created a specific military culture in regions like Croatia and Transylvania, where generations were raised with a martial tradition prepared to defend the border. Even today, you might find old forts and watchtowers in these areas, silent reminders of a time when the Habsburg military stood guard. This constant defensive posture contributed to a pragmatic approach to warfare, valuing strategic positioning and resource management as much as battlefield heroism. The ability to pull back, regroup, and fight another day was often more valuable than a costly decisive victory. This approach to long-term military strategy, rooted in centuries of defending a sprawling empire, left its subtle mark on successor states. Number 7. The paper trails of power, bureaucracy, and modern governance. Step into a government office in Vienna today, or perhaps in Prague, Budapest, or Zagreb. You might notice a certain orderliness, a specific way. Documents are filed, decisions made, and public services delivered. This meticulous approach to administration, often stereotyped as rigid or slow, is a direct inheritance from the Habsburg Empire. For centuries, the empire faced the enormous challenge of governing a vast, diverse territory with different laws, customs, and languages. To manage this sprawling complexity, the Habsburgs, particularly under enlightened rulers like Maria Theresia and her son Joseph II, embarked on ambitious reforms that laid the groundwork for modern state bureaucracy. They didn't just build an empire of land, they built an empire of paperwork. And this paper trail proved remarkably enduring. Before these reforms, governing was often haphazard. Local nobles held significant power, laws varied wildly from region to region, and the emperor's authority was often challenged. Maria Theresia, a pragmatic and determined ruler who ascended the throne in the mid-18th century, realized that for the empire to survive and thrive, it needed a strong, centralized administration. She wasn't just interested in winning wars, she was interested in creating a functioning state. She oversaw the creation of a professional civil service, a body of trained officials who were loyal to the crown rather than to local interests. These civil servants were appointed based on merit, not just birth, and they followed clear rules and procedures. This marked a significant shift towards a modern, rational form of governance. Joseph II, Maria Theresia's son, pushed these reforms even further. He was a true enlightened despot, believing that the state should serve the well-being of its subjects, and that this could best be achieved through rational administration. He abolished serfdom, introduced legal reforms, and attempted to standardize laws and taxes across the empire. His goal was to create a unified state where all subjects were equal before the law, regardless of their social standing or ethnic background. While many of his radical changes were met with resistance and even reversed after his death, the fundamental idea of a centralized professional bureaucracy remained. The very notion that government should be systematic, predictable, and accountable to a central authority was solidified during this period. Think about the establishment of a land registry where every piece of property was meticulously recorded, or the creation of a centralized tax system replacing a chaotic patchwork of local levies. These might seem mundane, but they were revolutionary steps in state building. They allowed the government to collect revenue efficiently, to plan infrastructure projects, and to understand the resources of the empire. This level of detailed record-keeping and statistical analysis was groundbreaking for its time, providing a model for efficient public administration that would be adopted by other states. The idea that precise data could inform state policy was a powerful one, and it left a lasting mark on how governments operate. The administrative practices developed during this era, from standardized forms to the clear hierarchy of departments, became deeply ingrained. When the empire dissolved in 1918, the new successor states often simply adopted and adapted these existing bureaucratic structures. A civil servant in Vienna, Prague, or Ljubljana might work in an office building designed by the Habsburgs, use filing systems first conceived under Maria Theresia, and adhere to administrative principles that had been refined over centuries. Even the language of bureaucracy, often formal and precise, carried echoes of the German administrative jargon that had been the lingua franca of imperial governance. The emphasis on universal education, particularly for state service, also contributed to this legacy. The Theresian Military Academy, the Josephinian Academy of Surgeons, and countless smaller schools were established to train competent officials, doctors, and officers. This created a professional class dedicated to public service, a concept that underpins modern governance. The idea that state officials should be highly trained and operate within a defined legal framework was a powerful one, shaping the expectations of citizens regarding their governments. This legacy of methodical, orderly administration might not be as glamorous as grand palaces or military victories, but its impact on the daily lives of citizens then and now is arguably far more profound. It is the invisible backbone of modern governance in a significant part of Europe. Number 6. Knowledge unleashed. Education and Enlightenment reforms. Imagine a time when access to books was limited. Schooling was mostly for the elite, and scientific inquiry was often viewed with suspicion. Then, a powerful empress and her visionary son decided to change everything. The Habsburg Empire, under Maria Theresia and Joseph II, became an unexpected crucible for Enlightenment ideals, particularly in the realm of education. Their reforms were not just about opening a few schools, they were about a fundamental shift in how knowledge was created, disseminated, and applied, leaving an enduring mark on the very concept of public education in scientific Europe. Maria Theresia, despite facing a massive war for her inheritance, understood that a strong state needed educated citizens and competent officials. She famously decreed in 1774 that every child, regardless of social class, should have access to basic schooling. This was a revolutionary concept for its time, challenging centuries of tradition where education was a privilege. She ordered the establishment of village schools, aiming to bring literacy and basic numeracy to the wider population. Think of the sheer logistical challenge of this: finding teachers, building schoolhouses, developing curricula for a multi-ethnic, multilingual empire. Yet she pushed for it, believing it essential for the moral and economic well-being of her subjects. And the strength of the state, her reforms also extended to higher education. The University of Vienna, already centuries old, was thoroughly modernized under her patronage. New faculties were established, scientific research was encouraged, and academic freedom within limits was promoted. Medicine, law, and administration became areas of intense focus as the empire needed highly trained professionals. Libraries were expanded and the censorship that had stifled intellectual inquiry for generations was gradually eased. Maria Theresia understood that a vibrant intellectual life was not a luxury, but a necessity for progress. She saw education as a tool for state building, a way to foster loyalty and produce skilled workers and administrators. Joseph II, even more radical than his mother, took these educational reforms to new heights. He believed in the power of reason to solve societal problems and dismantle old superstitions. He pushed for universal compulsory education, aiming to eradicate illiteracy entirely. He established academies for specialized training, such as military, engineering, and medicine, ensuring that the empire had access to the latest scientific and technical knowledge. He also drastically reduced the influence of the church in education, placing it firmly under state control. This was a bold move, challenging centuries of religious dominance in schooling, and it paved the way for secular public education systems that would become the norm in modern Europe. His emphasis on practical knowledge was particularly forward-thinking. Joseph II wasn't just interested in classical learning. He wanted education to be useful, to improve agricultural techniques, to advance industry, and to promote public health. He supported scientific research, establishing botanical gardens, astronomical theodatories. Doctors and scientists were given state support, their work seen as vital for the progress of society. The Vienna General Hospital, a major center for medical innovation, was a direct outcome of this enlightened approach, attracting leading physicians and researchers from across Europe. The long-term impact of these reforms was profound. They laid the groundwork for modern public education systems across Central Europe. The idea of a standardized curriculum, state-trained teachers, and universal access to schooling became deeply embedded. Even after the empire's collapse, the successor states built their own education systems on these Habsburg foundations. The universities in Vienna, Prague, and Budapest, which had been reformed and expanded under Habsburg rule, continued to be intellectual powerhouses, attracting students and scholars from far beyond their national borders. Generations of intellectuals, artists, and scientists were educated in institutions that bore the imprint of Maria Theresia and Joseph II's vision. The legacy also extended to how people viewed knowledge itself. The Enlightenment focused on reason, critical thinking, and the application of science to solve real-world problems permeated society. This fostered a culture of intellectual inquiry and a valuing of expertise that persisted for centuries. While the empire eventually crumbled, the institutional structures and philosophical underpinnings of its education shaped the minds and aspirations of millions, proving that investing in knowledge is a powerful way to leave an enduring mark. Number 5. Healing hands, public health, healthcare, and social welfare initiatives. Imagine a time when illness struck without warning, when epidemics swept through towns and medical knowledge was often based more on superstition than science. For centuries, healthcare was largely a private affair, accessible mostly to the wealthy, with limited state involvement. Then, during the Habsburg era, particularly under Maria Theresia and Joseph II, a quiet revolution began in public health and social welfare. These rulers, driven by a blend of enlightened ideals and pragmatic state building, recognized that a healthy population was essential for a strong empire. Their efforts laid the groundwork for modern public health systems and social provisions, leaving a legacy of institutional care that still resonates today. In Central Europe, Maria Theresia, facing a population often ravaged by disease and poverty, understood that simply treating the sick was not enough. She began to implement measures aimed at prevention and public good. One of her key initiatives was the establishment of the Josephinum, a military medical academy founded in 1785. This wasn't just a hospital. It was a cutting-edge institution for medical education and research. It trained military surgeons, but its influence extended far beyond the battlefield. It promoted rigorous scientific method, dissection, and clinical observation, moving medicine away from outdated theories and towards evidence-based practice. The stunning anatomical models made of wax that are still housed there today served as teaching tools, a testament to the era's commitment to visual learning and precise anatomical understanding. Joseph II, her son, was even more radical in his vision for public health. He believed that the state had a duty to care for its sick and impoverished citizens. His most famous contribution was the establishment of the Vienna General Hospital in 1784. This was no ordinary hospital. It was designed to be a grand, centralized institution, open to all, regardless of social status or ability to pay. It brought together all the major medical disciplines under one roof: surgery, internal medicine, psychiatry. This centralization allowed for a greater concentration of medical talent, fostering collaboration and grounding research. The hospital became a major hub for medical innovation, attracting leading doctors and students from across Europe and establishing Vienna as a world center for medicine. Beyond hospitals, Joseph II introduced regulations aimed at improving sanitation and hygiene. He ordered the paving of streets, the improvement of water supplies, and the systematic burial of the dead outside city limits, a measure aimed at preventing the spread of disease. He also created institutions for the mentally ill, separating them from general hospitals and providing specialized care, albeit often in primitive forms. These measures, though rudimentary by modern standards, represented a significant step towards a state taking responsibility for the health of its citizens, moving beyond charity to organized public health initiatives. Maria Theresia established orphanages and poorhouses, attempting to provide some basic safety net for the most vulnerable. Joseph II furthered these efforts, viewing poverty as a societal problem that the state had a role in addressing. While not a comprehensive welfare state, in the modern sense, these initiatives reflected a growing understanding that societal problems required organized state intervention, not just private philanthropy. The idea that basic care for the sick and poor was a public responsibility, rather than solely a religious or family one, began to take root during this period. The long-term impact of these initiatives was profound. Vienna's reputation as a world-leading center for medicine, particularly in the 19th and early 20th centuries, can be directly traced back to the institutional foundations laid by Maria Theresia and Joseph II. The Vienna General Hospital became a model for medical institutions, worldwide, pioneering new surgical techniques, pathology, and clinical methods. Many famous medical figures, including Ignaz Semmelweis, the pioneer of hand hygiene, worked and taught there, their breakthroughs impacting medicine. Globally, the concept of a centralized state-supported public health system became a benchmark for many European nations. The meticulous record, keeping the emphasis on scientific training for medical professionals, and the idea of universal access to basic healthcare, however limited, all found their roots in the Habsburg reforms. Even today, the institutional memory of these pioneering efforts lives on in the structure of healthcare systems and the enduring respect for medical science in the former Habsburg lands. It showed that compassion combined with scientific rigor and state organization could profoundly improve the lives of millions. Number 4. Coffee cake and conversation, the enduring cafe culture and culinary traditions. Walk into a traditional coffee house in Vienna. Today, the scent of roasted beans hangs in the air. The clinking of porcelain cups provides a gentle soundtrack, and people linger for hours reading newspapers. This is more than just a place to get a drink. It is an institution, a way of life, and a direct descendant of the vibrant cafe culture that blossomed under the Habsburgs. But the empire's culinary legacy extends far beyond coffee, weaving a rich tapestry of flavors and traditions across Central Europe, a delicious testament to its multi-ethnic heritage. The story of Viennese coffee culture often begins with the Ottoman siege of Vienna in 1683. Legend has it that after the Ottoman forces retreated, they left behind sacks of strange beans that the Viennese initially thought were camel fodder. A Polish-Ukrainian merchant and former interpreter for the Imperial Army, Jerzy Franciszek Kukulecki, recognized them as coffee. He was granted permission to open the first coffee house in Vienna, and soon the dark aromatic brew captured the city's imagination. This early fascination grew into a deep-seated love affair. Coffee houses became meeting places, social hubs, and informal universities, where ideas were exchanged, deals were struck, and friendships were forged. What made Viennese coffee houses unique was the way they fostered a distinct social ritual. Unlike quick-service establishments, these were places where you were encouraged to stay, to occupy a marble-topped table for hours with just one cup of coffee. Newspapers were provided, sometimes even in different languages, reflecting the empire's diverse population. Writers, artists, intellectuals, and revolutionaries all found a second home in these establishments, shaping public opinion and cultural trends. The very atmosphere of intellectual ferment and relaxed conviviality became part of the city's identity. A direct product of the Habsburg era's cosmopolitan outlook, even today, many traditional Viennese cafes maintain this timeless charm, drawing visitors and locals into their warm embrace. Beyond coffee, the Habsburg Empire was a melting pot of culinary traditions. Each region, each ethnic group contributed its unique flavors to the imperial palate, creating a rich fusion cuisine. From the hearty goulash of Hungary to the delicate pastries of Vienna, from the savory dumplings of Bohemia to the Mediterranean influences of the Adriatic coast, the empire's food was a delicious reflection of its diversity. Wiener Schnitzel, perhaps Austria's most famous dish, is believed to have roots in Italy, arriving in Vienna through imperial connections. The Sachertorte, a decadent chocolate cake, was created for Prince Metternich, a symbol of the imperial court's indulgence. These dishes, once enjoyed in palaces and humble kitchens across the empire, became iconic, transcending borders and becoming staples in many modern national cuisines. The exchange of ingredients and cooking techniques was constant. Paprika from Hungary found its way into Viennese kitchens, while Austrian pastries influenced bakeries in Prague and Budapest. This culinary cross-pollination meant that food became a shared language, a silent testament to centuries of coexistence, even amidst political tensions. Grandmothers in different parts of the empire might have had their own versions of a similar dish, adapting it to local ingredients and tastes. But the underlying connections remained. This layered culinary heritage is evident today in the menus of restaurants across Central Europe, where you might find dishes with strikingly similar names or ingredients, hinting at a shared past. The empire's impact also touched the rituals of dining and hospitality. The elaborate court cuisine, with its multiple courses and formal service, influenced aristocratic tables across Europe. But even in more modest settings, the emphasis on quality, ingredients, careful preparation, and the pleasure of sharing a meal became deeply embedded. The culture of bakeries, confectionaries, and patisseries, producing exquisite cakes and pastries, also flourished under Habsburg patronage, particularly in Vienna. The skills of these artisans, passed down through generations, continue to delight palates today. The coffee house and the culinary traditions are not just historical curiosities. They are living, breathing parts of Central European identity. They represent a tangible, delicious connection to the Habsburg past, reminding us that empires leave behind more than just political boundaries. They leave behind tastes, aromas, and social rituals that continue to enrich daily life, proving that some legacies are best experienced one bite or one sip at a time. Number 3. Baroque splendor. Vienna's architectural and artistic masterpieces. Step onto the Ringstrasse in Vienna, the grand boulevard encircling the city center. You are immediately surrounded by architectural masterpieces. The magnificent State Opera, the sprawling Hofburg Palace, the Grand Parliament, the elegant museums. This visual symphony of monumental buildings, ornate facades, and sweeping public spaces is more than just impressive. It is a direct inheritance from the Habsburg Empire, a tangible legacy of its patronage of art and architecture that shapes not only Vienna but countless other cities across its vast domains. The Habsburgs didn't just rule. They built, and their building projects left an indelible mark on the landscape, creating a distinct aesthetic that still defines the region. After centuries of modest growth, Vienna truly blossomed into an imperial capital in the Baroque era, roughly from the late 17th to the mid-18th century. Following the defeat of the Ottoman siege in 1683, the city experienced a period of intense construction and artistic flourishing. The Habsburg emperors, seeking to project their power and piety, embraced the Baroque style with unparalleled enthusiasm. Think of opulent palaces like Schönbrunn, the summer residence of the imperial family, or the Belvedere Palace, built for Prince Eugene of Savoy. These weren't just homes. They were statements. They featured dramatic curves, rich ornamentation, frescoed ceilings, and expansive gardens designed to awe and impress. Architects like Johann Bernhard Fischer, von Erlach, and Lucas von Hildebrand became stars. Their designs defining an era. This architectural boom wasn't confined to Vienna. Throughout the empire, from Prague to Budapest, from Salzburg to Graz, cities were adorned with grand Baroque churches, town halls, and noble residence. The style became a visual language of imperial authority and Catholic piety. It brought a sense of unity and grandeur to diverse regions, making a distinct Habsburg footprint on the urban landscape. Even today, a stroll through the old towns of many Central European cities reveals charming squares dominated by Baroque churches, fountains, and statues, whispers of a time when imperial architects shaped skylines. Beyond grand structures, the Habsburgs were relentless patrons of all forms of art. Painting, sculpture, music, and theater flourished under their watchful eye. The imperial art collection, housed in the Belvedere, and later the Kunsthistorisches Museum, became one of the finest in the world. Counting masterpieces from across Europe, artists were commissioned to adorn palaces, churches, and private residences, creating a rich tapestry of visual culture that celebrated imperial triumphs, religious devotion, and classical ideals. This immense artistic output contributed to a sophisticated cultural environment, making Vienna a magnet for talent and creativity. The late 19th century, during the reign of Emperor Franz Joseph I, saw another significant architectural transformation in Vienna: the creation of the Ringstrasse. This monumental project replaced old city walls with a broad boulevard lined with magnificent public buildings. The State Opera, the Burgtheater, the Parliament, the City Hall, and the Imperial Museums were all constructed in various historicist styles, reflecting a deliberate attempt to create a modern representative capital. This grand urban planning initiative, with its emphasis on civic beauty and public spaces, became a model for city planning in other European capitals, influencing how urban environments were designed to serve both functionality and aesthetic. The legacy of Habsburg art and architecture is not just about old buildings. It is about the very identity of these cities. Vienna, in particular, is unimaginable without its Baroque palaces and Ringstrasse splendor. These buildings continue to function as living spaces, housing government offices, cultural institutions, and private residences. They are major tourist attractions, drawing millions who come to marvel at their beauty and history. They are also places where daily life unfolds, reminding residents and visitors alike of the empire's lasting impact on their visual world. The sheer scale and quality of this artistic output demonstrate a deep-seated belief in the power of beauty to express power, prestige, and cultural sophistication. This devotion to artistic excellence created a lasting heritage that continues to inspire and shape the cultural landscape of a significant part of Europe. Number 2. A kaleidoscope of cultures, multiculturalism, and its complexities. Imagine a grand banquet table stretching for miles, laden with dishes from a dozen different lands, and around it sit people speaking different languages, wearing varied traditional clothes, and worshipping in distinct ways. This was, in essence, the Habsburg Empire, a vast sprawling entity that encompassed an astonishing array of ethnic groups, languages, and religions, from Germans in Austria to Hungarians, Czechs, Poles, Croats, Serbs, Slovenes, Slovaks, Romanians, Ukrainians, and Italians. The empire was a living, breathing experiment in paneurism long before the term became widely used. This unique demographic tapestry was both its greatest strength and its ultimate undoing, leaving a complex legacy of coexistence, tension, and shared experience that continues to shape Central Europe today. For centuries, the Habsburgs ruled over lands where national borders as we know them simply didn't exist. People identified more by their local region, their religion, or their loyalty to the emperor, rather than by a single national identity. A village might have spoken German, but the next valley might have spoken Czech, and the town over the hill Hungarian. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and Jewish communities lived side by side, sometimes peacefully, sometimes with friction. The imperial administration, headquartered in Vienna, had to learn to navigate this intricate web of identities, developing pragmatic approaches to governance that attempted to accommodate diversity, even if often imperfectly. This Kantian reality led to a fascinating cultural exchange. Ideas, artistic styles, culinary traditions, and linguistic influences constantly flowed across internal borders. A Viennese cafe might serve pastries with Hungarian names. A Croat military officer might speak German, Hungarian, and his native tongue. This constant interaction created a unique Central European cultural synthesis, a blend of influences that was distinct from Western or Eastern Europe. It fostered a certain cosmopolitanism, especially in major cities like Vienna, Prague, and Budapest, where people from different backgrounds mingled in universities, coffee houses, and government offices. As the 19th century progressed, the rise of nationalism began to challenge the very foundation of the multi-ethnic empire. Different groups started to demand greater autonomy, recognition of their languages, and even independent states. The empire struggled to reconcile these rising national aspirations with its traditional imperial structure. The Compromise of 1867, which created the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary, was an attempt to accommodate Hungarian demands, but it left other ethnic groups feeling marginalized, sowing seeds of discontent that would ultimately contribute to the empire's collapse. The tension between a unifying imperial identity and fragmenting national loyalties became a defining feature of the empire's final decades. Yet even through these tensions, the shared experience of living under Habsburg rule left an indelible mark. Generations of people across different ethnic groups shared common administrative systems, legal frameworks, and military service. They went to schools that taught a standardized curriculum. Even if the language of instruction varied, they rode on railways built by the empire, used the same currency, and navigated a common bureaucracy. This shared institutional experience created a practical, if sometimes resented, sense of commonality that transcended mere ethnicity. It showed that even when people fought over identity, they shared a common historical framework. When the empire finally dissolved, the new nation-states inherited this complex mosaic of populations, Many new states found themselves with significant ethnic minorities within their borders, a direct consequence of the empire's fluid demography. This immediately posed challenges to nation building, forcing new governments to grapple with questions of citizenship, language rights, and cultural autonomy. The legacy of mutualism under the Habsburgs meant that the successor states were rarely ethnically homogeneous, continuing the long historical experiment in diverse coexistence, sometimes with great difficulty, but always with the quiet understanding that their national identities were shaped by the empire's molded. It showed that building a new future often meant inheriting the intricate, beautiful, and sometimes troubling tapestry of the past. Number 1. The idea of a heart, the enduring concept of Mitteleuropa. The maps changed in 1918. Borders shifted, empires crumbled, and new nations emerged from the ruins of the Habsburg Empire. Yet, despite the dramatic political reordering, a powerful unspoken idea lingered. The concept of Mitteleuropa, or Central Europe. This wasn't a neatly defined geographical area, nor a single political entity. Instead, it was a cultural, historical, and intellectual space, a unique blend of influences forged over centuries of Habsburg rule. Even today, long after the last emperor abdicated, this elusive idea of Central Europe continues to resonate, shaping perceptions, inspiring artists, and influencing political discourse across the region. It is the most ethereal, yet perhaps the most enduring legacy of the sprawling empire. What precisely is Mitteleuropa? It is not simply the geographical center of Europe. Instead, it speaks to a particular sensibility, a shared historical experience that sets it apart from Western Europe and Eastern Europe. Under Habsburg rule, this vast area was a crossroads of cultures, languages, and religions. German, Slavic, Hungarian, and Latin cultures constantly interacted, producing a vibrant intellectual and artistic scene. Cities like Vienna, Prague, and Budapest became centers of innovation, where ideas from across the continent met and mingled. Writers, philosophers, musicians, and scientists from diverse backgrounds contributed to a unique cultural synthesis, creating works that transcended narrow national boundaries. Think of the psychological depth of Freud's Vienna, the philosophical inquiries of Wittgenstein, or the literary explorations of Franz Kafka in Prague. These minds were products of a cosmopolitan environment fostered by the empire. The idea of Mitteleuropa also carries a sense of complex layered identity. Unlike nations built on a single dominant ethnic group, the Habsburg lands taught people to live with multiple allegiances and overlapping cultural influences. A person might be a German-speaking Jew from Bohemia, proud of their Czech heritage, yet deeply loyal to the emperor and embracing Viennese culture. This nuanced sense of self, often characterized by a certain irony or melancholy, became a hallmark of the region's artistic and intellectual output. It reflected the reality of living in an empire where identity was rarely simple or singular. Even after the empire's dissolution, this internal complexity continued to define individuals and communities within the newly formed nation-states. The challenges of the 20th century, particularly the rise of totalitarian regimes and the Cold War, reinforced the idea of Mitteleuropa as a distinct space. For many intellectuals trapped behind the Iron Curtain, the concept became a symbol of a lost past, a yearning for a return to a more open, culturally rich, and pluralistic existence. Writers like Milan Kundera and Claudio Magris explored the unique fate of this region, arguing for its distinct historical trajectory and its profound contributions to European civilization. Often highlighting the tragedies that befell it after the empire's demise that befell it, they sought to reclaim a shared heritage that transcended the new political divisions. Even today, as nations within the former Habsburg orbit integrate into broader European structures, the idea of Mitteleuropa persists. It manifests in various ways. in regional cooperation initiatives that seek to revive old ties, in cultural festivals that celebrate shared artistic traditions, and in academic discussions about the region's unique historical path. There is a quiet acknowledgement that despite the passage of time and the creation of new states, a common thread still connects these lands. A thread woven by centuries of shared imperial experience. The railway lines built by the Habsburg still connect these cities. The architectural styles still radiate across borders, and the historical memories, both good and bad, continue to inform the present. The Habsburg Empire may be gone, its flags lowered, its emperors exiled, but the idea it inadvertently created of a distinct and profoundly important Central European heartland remains. It is a testament to the fact that empires, even in their collapse, can leave behind not just physical ruins or political boundaries, but powerful, enduring concepts that continue to shape how people understand. Then Kinturi. The ghost of Mitiroba still walks, a silent reminder of a bygone era that shaped the very soul of a continent.